From Sony dropping a Resident Evil VR announcement out of nowhere, to the new mode possibly coming out in 2024, here's everything you need to know about Resident Evil 4. I mean, who doesn't love this franchise? Sony's latest announcement left everyone shocked. Why's that? Well, because you're getting a VR mode for the Resident Evil 4 remake. The studio put out a bunch of new announcements. There's a new Spider-Man game, a weird new streaming handheld, and even a remake of Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater. But what a lot of people didn't expect to hear was that they'd work with Capcom again, that too for a PSVR exclusive. You heard that right. Players have been desperately waiting for any news about the Resident Evil franchise, especially since the last two games that they've put out both have had VR modes. Not just that, but they've somehow managed to make the entire deal even sweeter. Anyone who's already bought the game will have free access to the new mode. That's right, though you're going to need a PSVR headset for it. It's going to be a PS exclusive thing. But right now, I don't really know if it's just a timed exclusive or not yet. I mean, they'd have to remake the entire thing and optimize it for other headsets if it is. Though that would bring in a buttload of other problems, and you know that they'd rather go for an exclusive than a VR experience full of bugs. That's probably the most exciting thing from the announcement. But there's a huge question that's remained unanswered. Is the plot going to change for the new mode? Resident Evil 4 is one of the best horror games of all time. Because of that, don't go expecting some huge change to the story just because it's in VR. Instead, you're going to be playing as Leon once again after he survived Raccoon City's rampage, only to be thrown into another troubling situation. But this time...
Ashley. Ashley Graham, are you in here?
He's in a village in Spain searching for the president's daughter, Ashley. But don't forget, you're going to be playing it in first-person perspective for the first time. The fact that you're physically going to control him just makes it better, thanks to the miracle of VR. So, get ready to take on hordes of monsters and the evil cult that wants to infect everyone with a weird serum that basically lobotomizes its victims, even turning them into full-on monsters. All while you're trying to bring Ash back home, only to be thrown into a world where you're struggling for survival. Talk about raising the stakes. I mean, you can't deny that Las Plagas is going to be even more terrifying, especially when it's so up close and personal. Not just that, but you're going to meet new friends like Luis and old ones too, like Ada Wong, and join forces to find a way out after demolishing the entire cult. I mean, it's perfect, and it's a smart move to keep the primary storyline the same. On the other hand, since the whole thing is in VR, it's not going to play the same. So, what's the gameplay going to be like? If the 1.5-minute gameplay trailer is anything to go by, then you're going to be playing the same game. But it's going to have a much more horror approach to it, all because of that perspective change. It honestly looks more like you're playing Outlast or something, instead of a Resident Evil game. Mix that in with the insane combat parts from the remake, and you've got yourself a pretty solid deal that's gonna make everyone crap their pants. And the trailer gave a little sneak peek into the combat as well. You're gonna be dual-wielding weapons, so that opens up a ton of doors for the players to feel even more badass. I mean, how cool would it be to use your knife anytime while shooting at enemies? Though it would also make the survival aspect of the remake much harder. Overall, the remake is refreshing enough to make you want to play the game all over again. Plus, with the new PSVR, they're going to bring in something new, right? Correct. In fact, they've got a bunch of new features to incorporate into it. You've loved all the other VR modes they've put out for RE games, so why fix something if it ain't broken? That's exactly what the devs seem to be thinking. But they're going to be improving on everything, a bunch, so you can for sure expect the weapon handling to be even better. Of course, you're still going to be able to dual-wield weapons and all of that, this time with much better response times and smoother animations. Talk about the ultimate gameplay experience. But that's not all. I can't forget about the new rendering thingamajig they're using. All of that's possible because of PSVR 2's new eye-tracking tech that renders what you're focusing on in the highest quality possible, making the game look even more realistic than real life. Plus, it adds that amazing depth of field, making the whole thing even more immersive. Oh, and there's also the new haptic feedback part of it. Because of that, Not only are you gonna be able to feel what you're touching in the game when you get hit and punched and all that, the movements are calibrated differently for each and everything in the game, so you know that this is gonna be the most immersive experience ever. All in all, these might not be the biggest changes out there, but they're gonna make your journey as Leon a million times better. Though other than the obvious, nothing's been said about it by either Capcom or Sony, so you never know. They might just add in a bunch of new modes, only for the VR version, or even mini-games. Who knows? The possibilities are endless at this point. Though you already know that even if there aren't new modes for VR, gamers are more than just excited about it. Just look at their reactions to the announcement. Who could have ever thought that you wouldn't just be able to play one of the best zombie games in the current gen, but also get to experience it yourself in VR? That too with the new PSVR 2, taking it to a completely different level. No one saw this coming, and gamers are dying for the game to be out. They're all over the internet, talking about how they finally get to actually be in their favorite game. Plus, they can't get enough of the new VR headset, so being able to play a full-on AAA game on it sounds like a dream come true. And the best part is, it's free for anyone who's already bought the game. Who's gonna be complaining about that now? I mean, the VR mode they put out for Resident Evil 8 was straight up a banger. There's no one out there who didn't absolutely love that mode, so they're expecting more of the same experience, but this time for a game they've loved for decades. But I do have some bad news here too. Apparently some people are still pissed off about it, saying that they shouldn't put out games this big just for people who can afford a headset, leading to others missing out on all the added content you're gonna get. Not just that, but they're also pissed off over Resident Evil 7 fans having to pay for the same experience back when it came out, saying that it's just unfair, and that the studio really needs to stay consistent. And hey, it makes sense. People have loved Resident Evil 4 for so many years now that it's kinda sad to imagine losing out on it just because you can't afford a headset. All of that aside though, when it comes to the game itself, you've got an incredible story, great gameplay, and so much more. So let me predict the biggest question on everyone's mind right now. When does it even come out? When do you finally get your hands on one of the biggest things to happen to VR? Well, since the game has only been announced at the end of May, there's not much to go off of for when it could come out. But that definitely doesn't mean that I can't make a solid guess about it, especially since Capcom's behind it. I mean, while the rest of the gaming industry's going insane with delays, these people still find a way to make it work. So it boils down to two things. If they've already started to work on this project, then you can be sure to play it sometime around the end of 2023. I mean, they do have a trailer for it. So it seems very likely that it's at least out of the first stages of production, and that there isn't a lot of work left for them to do. On the other hand, it could also mean that they've only worked on the trailer to show off what the gameplay could look like, meaning that they still need to start work on it. If that's the case, then a release before 2024 is highly unlikely. But why is that? Like, doesn't the game technically already exist? Sure, they already have the game made, but optimizing it for the best VR experience will be a hell of a time for the studio. You can't deny that a lot is riding on this DLC, and they need to get it right. So they're gonna take their sweet time. So from the new mode possibly coming out in 2024, to Sony dropping the Resident Evil VR announcement out of nowhere, that's been a look at everything you need to know about Resident Evil 4.